Greetings everyone. In this tutorial we are going to deploy a Django website on AWS. We are going to learn a lot of things in this series. We are going to build a Django website, then we will go to serve the Django website using GUnit. Then we will do a Docker container for the Django website and a Docker container for Nginx. Then we will, in order to use the both of the Docker container at once, we need to use Docker Compose. After that we are going to use AWS Postgres, which will be act as our database for the website. Then we will deploy the Docker Compose file on the EC2 server. Use the AWS Route 53 for the routing of the domain which we have one to connect our website, and then we will use AWS Certificate Manager to get an SSL certificate, and then we will use AWS Load Balancer to use that SSL certificate and serve our website as HTTPS. So start from the Visual Studio Code. We need to create a virtual environment which we can create using Python 3-m virtual environment and the name of virtual environment. I'm going to name it as virtual environment also. Then I'm going to activate it. The virtual environment has been activated. Now I'm going to create a Django project. But before that I have to install Django. Now I need to create a Django project. Now we have created the main Django project, which we have these files: settings, URLs, WSGI, ASGI, and you can see that I have two main app. One is the main directory and other is subdirectory. I'm going to rename the main directory because just for the simplification, and I'm going to call it as my app. You can call it whatever you want to call it. Now I need to create the actual app which we are going to build. I am going to call it as sub app. This is my own convention to call main app or sub app. Sub app is the app in which we are going to do everything. That how pages are rendered, that how functions are being served, how static files are being loaded, and everything is in the sub app. To create the sub app, we need to use this manage.py file, and the manage.py file is inside the main app, is inside the my app. So I'm going inside the my app, and then I am going to create this sub app. Basically I have to create it with this small one. Actually it doesn't matter, but just I like it. Okay. Now I need to register this sub app with this settings.py file of the main app, and I'm going to put it here. Okay. The next thing, I have to create a urls.py file inside this sub app. This urls.py file of the sub app is going to connect with the urls.py file of the main app. Why I need this urls.py file inside the sub app is because our template, which we haven't just created, is going to serve via this urls.py file. So I'm going to create a folder, name it as templates, and in this template I'm going to create a file that as home.html. This is the file which you will see when we launch up the server. And this file needs some data. From where the data comes from? The data comes from the views.py file. And let's define a function. You can name it whatever you want. And this will render this request. This request will go to the home.html which we have created, and it will accept a context which we'll define later. Now we need to connect this views.py file with this urls.py file of this sub app. So inside this sub app, I'm going to import some function from Django. dot URLs import path, and now I need the home function from the views dot file. So from dot import views, I can write it even this way, or I can write even this way, from dot views import home. It's up to me. Anyway, now let's define this URL pattern. Actually, it should be square bracket, not the curly bracket. Okay. This shows that if I write something like say that XYZ, then after your main domain you have to write XYZ in order to get this home page. But we want it as root, so I'm not going to define it anything inside this bracket. And now we have this views.py connected with this urls.py. Now I need to connect this urls.py file with the urls.py file of the main app. So let's say we can do that. Path. Okay, as I defined earlier, I am going to see it on the root page, not on the sub page. I am not going to define anything, and I am going to do include sub app URLs. I'm going to include the urls.py file of this sub app to the urls.py file of the main app, and I also need I need to define this include only. That is from the basically this admin path. Okay, now let's run the server, and before that let's see if we got some error. Python manage.py run server. Okay, let's go to this page, and you can see there is nothing because we haven't passed anything to this home HTML file. Let's just pass print dictionary and say that everything is working. So if we print this variable in the home.html, actually display this variable because home.html has a print function, is working, we can see that everything is working there if it's everything is working. Otherwise we can't see that. So just save that and okay, refresh it, and you can see that everything is working. Okay, the next step is we need to create a Django model. Why we need to create that Django model? Because this is the information we are going to get from the user via the form and going to save in the database. So I'm create a class, my model, which will be inherited from model class of the Django, and it accepts two fields. One field is the text field and other field is basically the image field. So let's say models dot char field, max length 100, so it can accept characters of 100 length at maximum, and the other is image, and it is models dot image field, and it is uploaded to the image folder. Okay, it says that to use this image field we have to install the pillow. Okay, let me install this pillow, but before that let me create a new file, requirements.txt, and inside this folder I'm going to save every package I'm going to import, I'm going to use in this project. Okay, one thing I can do is that I can create a new terminal, and inside this terminal let activate this virtual environment, and I can style add pip install pillow here. Okay, and I can go back to this terminal and I can refresh that. Okay, it's not working. Let me restart it again. Okay, it's now working. Now the next thing is that we have created the model file, we have to create a forms.py file. But before that, let me run the migrations so that we can get rid of these warnings. Okay, we need to move this my app to run this. Now I will do Python create manage.py create super user, or before that I can even run migrations. So make migration basically. Okay, now I can run the create super user, which will create a super user, actually an admin user. Okay, a username Talha, fine, email address no, password as Talha, no problem. It's just a dummy website. So now we need to create this migrate again and this make migration again. Okay, perfect, everything is working. Now let's go back to the server and restart it again. And you can see that there is no migration error right now or warning. Now the next thing we have to do is that we need to create a form which will be rendered to via the HTML page. So I'm going to create a file forms.py, and inside this file I'm going to import my model, but before that import Django forms. Okay, perfect. Now I need to go to this views.py file and render this actually the form via the views.py file. Actually, we need to pass these two things. One is the post and one is the file. Post is basically for the text maybe, and file is basically essentially for the image. If you don't define this request.file, it will not upload the image basically. So if the request method is post, we are going to save this form because essentially we are taking both the things. And now we are going to return this form also. Okay, from this views.py file we return this form, and now we need to define this form to this form.html. Let me see what from where we can get some of the code, and bootstrap. This is the thing from where we are going to get some of our code. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to put it inside our form.html file, and inside this, below this hello world, I'm going to define this form. And let me define form first. Let's put this. We need a CSRF token for the security purposes here. CSRF token. And we also need to define our form here. Form as okay. The encryption type is multi-part form data because we need to use an image. If we are not using any file or field, we don't need this. I think so. Then we need to define a button which will act as a submit button. And we are going to close this. Okay. Till this, let's run our server again and see. Okay, we got this hello world, but we didn't get any form. The reason can be okay. The reason is that we are taking this form here, but our views.py is returning this print. So let's replace print with form and run it again. Okay, you can see this. Now we have a form, an ugly form, and a button. So let me go to this admin and see. Okay, it should be this one. Username Talha, password Talha. Okay. One thing we forget to do is that we need to register our model we have created in the models.viewer file in the admin.viewer file. So I need to register my model inside here. And I also need to import this my model from the models import my model. Okay, now refresh this and we can see our model here. And now let's put something here, text 1, 2, 3, 4, ABC and an image. Okay, CSRF verification page. So this is something with this CSRF verification. CSRF token. What I have done is that I just restarted my server and I have redone this again and I can now enter the values. Nothing else. Just restart my server and put some and do the same again. Nothing changes, and but it start working. So in my model I have seen some values. So this is till now, and now we can see that if I go to my Visual Studio Code, if images are being saved under this image folder, but I have to make it to be stored under the media folder. So I am going in the settings.py file and in the allowed host, first thing I'm going to allow traffic from everywhere. This is not necessary right now, but this will be required when we are going to set up our Docker. So in the static URL, I am going to define the static root also. Static root, and this will be from this OS store. The similar way I'm going to define the media URL and the media root. Most of the people define it outside the sub-app file. I mean in the, if you unclose this, you have main app and the sub-app. Let's go delete this images. You have main app and sub app. Now you have another two folder below it, that is media and the static. But I define it usually inside this sub app. It's up to you where you want to define it. If you want to define this outside this sub app, just remove this sub app from here. and also need to import OS. And now refresh it. Okay, run the server again and think. Okay, now we see that I have a media folder. Inside the media folder I have an image folder. So till this point we have created a website. Now we have to see how we can serve this static file. I'm going to create a folder named as static, and inside this static I'm going to create, okay, I created a file basically instead of a folder. Actually I need to create a folder static. Inside static I need to create a file style.css. Inside this style.css I'm going to change this, whatever is my template, I'm going to change this color of h1 and the body. Let's make h1 as blue and also change the body color. Now I need to attach this style.css file with this home.html. So I am going inside this title, let's say, or maybe inside this. Okay, here I can define it as this will load all of this static folder. Now I need to define this CSS file. I'm going to copy this, or maybe I need to write it again. Link rel equal to style sheet. Inside this I will define my static style.css file. So I will do static, so that now that this file is coming from static. If this file is coming from media, then I will write at media here, and then style.css. Now I'm going to restart my server, and I'm going to refresh this page. You can see that the color has been changed. So I believe this is the end of this section. In the next section we are going to see the Docker and the Nginx and the G-Unicorn also. You can see that we can see this media file, we can see these colors because it means that our static file has been served. But one thing, Unicorn can't serve the static file, and we will see that in the next section.